Hello. Today I wanted to share with you the experience we've had with using mason bees and leafcutter bees in our garden. We've been using them for about 3 years now, and we wanted to share with you what our experiences have been, and then just answer a lot of the common questions that we see on our videos and receive through our blogs. So let's take a look at some of these questions. A lot of times people ask, what's the difference between mason bees, leafcutter bees, solitary bees? And the answer is pretty straightforward. Solitary bee is kind of the all-encompassing term for both leafcutter bees and mason bees. Mason bees are a little larger than the leafcutter bees, and they tend to do well in cooler climates, whereas in the warmer climates, it seems like for us, the leafcutter bees seem to perform a lot better. Now, that being said, we use mason bees in early spring. We release those and we see them throughout our garden all year round. And then usually come about May, we receive our packages of leafcutter bees. And the leafcutter bees seem to be in greater numbers, and we see them all throughout our garden. So I think primarily we tend to lean towards the leafcutter bee. But the reality is we get more benefits from both of them and all of them combined. The other thing that we find is that we run into a lot of solitary wasps, and there's a bunch of benefits with those. So we tend to leave those alone, but they tend to congregate in the same nesting areas as all of our mason bees and leafcutter bees do. People often ask us, how can so few bees be so effective in your garden? Whereas if you were to just have normal honeybees, there's thousands of them that could be pollinating your garden. And the reality is simple. Leafcutter bees and mason bees tend to stay within about a 300-foot radius of their home area. So wherever their house is and wherever they're making their homes, they typically only travel a few hundred feet. Whereas with honeybees, they tend to travel several miles. A lot of times when you have honeybees and you release them, they tend to go a ways from your garden, and that doesn't mean that they don't pollinate within your own garden. The other thing is honeybees are real neat and clean. So if you've noticed, they will get these pollen pants and they go in. And so they only tend to pollinate 5% of all the plants that they visit. The difference between that and the mason and leafcutter bees is that they're 95% efficient. And so their whole bodies are covered with pollen. So they tend to pollinate 95% of every plant they visit. And it has to do with the fact that their whole bodies are just covered in pollen. So for a small garden, especially in a confined area like we have here in our urban garden, they tend to work better for us than would be the honeybees. The other thing is, if you go to do maintenance on a honeybee hive, they tend to fly around a lot. And if you're in some confined spaces with close neighbors, they're going to be none too happy when they see all these bees start flying around. If you have leafcutter bees or solitary bees or mason bees, they tend to, nobody knows they're there, so nobody sees them. So it's something you can use in your backyard without affecting any of your neighbors. A lot of people have said, hey, I released my solitary bees and I don't see them. Well, the reality is because there's so few, they're harder to see. For us, we notice when we go out in the yard at the right time of days, the leafcutter bees are usually swarming their house. And when I say swarm, I don't mean they're doing it as a colony, but there's so much activity that you can go and see them there in the late afternoon. The other thing is when you release them, even though all of them may not take up residence in the house that you provided, they'll be close by, so they'll still come back and visit your garden. You'll find that if you spend a lot of time in your garden, that's where you'll tend to see your bees, not so much in the houses. A lot of people say, I really want to try solitary bees, but I don't want to get stung. The reality is they do sting, and that's what I've read, but I can't tell you that from personal experience because I've never been stung by one. The difference between the solitary bees and the honeybees is honeybees work as a collective. And so when you get near that hive, they send up an alarm saying, hey, we got a problem here. Let's everybody pitch in and ward off the potential danger, which is us or the gardener. With solitary bees, they're just one bee at a time living its best life. We run into them, we garden with them. They've never stung us. They've never been aggressive. And again, because they're not a colony or collective hive, you don't have the same potential problems with them as you would with honeybees in a real tight space like in an urban garden. So if you're wanting to find a docile bee, by far mason bees and leafcutter bees are your best option. Another common question is, how often do I harvest the honey from the mason and leafcutter bees? And then how much honey do we get out of it? Well, the answer is none. When it comes to the solitary bees, the biggest benefit you get out of them is their pollinators. You find a lot of times that people are thinking that they're just like a normal bee, and they're not. They're just like a garden insect. The only reason you see a bunch of them in your bee house is because that's the one place where you make a perfect home for them, because you're trying to entice them to stay near your garden. So unfortunately, no honey with the solitary bees, but if you're looking for good pollinators, that's your bee of choice. A lot of people wonder, how much care does it take to work with these bees? The reality is once you install the cocoons in the house, that's pretty much it. Now, if you're really trying to optimize your yield as far as harvesting the cocoons from the year prior, once a year you got to go through and you got to open the reeds and harvest the cocoons, both with the mason bees and the leafcutter bees. The reality is this year we tried something a little different. We left the boxes in there. The last time we harvested it, we found a lot of larvae from the solitary wasps, and I didn't want to disturb them this time because there was no way to salvage the wasps once we had taken those nesting blocks apart. So this year we tried not doing it. The other thing is I don't have a problem buying more cocoons every year just because I want to optimize our garden. To me, that's the most important thing. So spending a little money every year and buying additional cocoons is what we chose to do, but you'll have to make that decision on your own. People have a lot of questions when they're ordering them. Where do you get them? What can I expect? Hey, here it is in October, nobody has any. So the reality is you need a little forethought when it comes to buying, keeping, and ordering bees. We chose Crown Bee. We really like the service that we get from them. The other thing is they just seem to be a one-stop shop for everything solitary bees. As far as timing goes, you're going to want to get your bee house and all your stuff early spring, late winter, and then that way you can find the right place for it, get it installed. Your mason bees typically come earlier in the spring. Depending on where you live and weather is going to really affect that. For us, we get our mason bees around March or April. And then leafcutter bees are a warmer bee, and so their larva isn't fully developed early in the spring, so they hold on to those a little bit later in the season. We tend to get our leafcutter bees usually mid to late May, and it works out really, really well for us. So again, early spring, early summer, that's when you receive your bees. But one of the most important thing is you don't want to receive your bees until everything's in full blossom. And even if it is, it doesn't mean that they're ready to ship them yet. So you're going to have to coordinate that with Crown Bees. And a lot of it has to do with the area and where you're living and where you're gardening. So wrapping up, one of the biggest questions is, are they worth it? And the answer is yes. I know I say that, it sounds like I'm a honeybee hater, and that's not true. When we get to our place in Montana, one of the things we'll do is we will start caring for and doing beekeeping for honeybees because we want the honey. But the reality is, in a small garden environment or in an urban environment, I think that leafcutters, mason bees, and other solitary bees are a great option. You get the pollination that you want. They don't take a whole lot of maintenance. It's kind of a get them up there and forget about them and let them do their thing. So all in all, we've been really, really happy. The mason bee videos have been really huge for us on our YouTube channel, and we really appreciate all the comments. So if you have some questions or comments, please take some time in the comment section below and put them down there. We'll answer each one of your questions. And the other thing it does is sometimes we get asked questions that we don't have the answers to, so we'll go out and research it. And I really appreciate you watching our video. Thanks a lot.